Welcome to day 3, everybody. I'm excited for today because we get to use decorative dies. Now, if you don't have any decorative dies, don't worry, you can just use pattern paper for today to decorate your page. But to get started, I'm going to introduce you to our 2 patterns. On the left is pattern number 448, and it is a mostly square pattern. And on the right is pattern 189, and it is a puzzle pattern. The left pattern could be considered also a pinwheel, but on our pattern gallery, we have it listed as mostly square. And the right pattern is called a puzzle, but it's basically an asymmetrical design. And I picked these 2 because both of them use set A, which is the square-shaped set. The puzzle pattern is asymmetrical, and sometimes I like to match an asymmetrical with a more structured-looking layout. Also, the left side is kind of a busier pattern with a lot of design spots, and sometimes I like to match that with a pattern with bigger design spots to make it less busy and more balanced. The 2 dies I'm holding now, this is from the Quatrefoil die set. So if you have a 2x2 die, the square one there, or 1x3, please use those. And it's really easy to figure out where they can go on a page pattern. You should get a piece of paper like this with your dies, and as you can see, the square ones are blue, just like set A, and the other one is purple, just like set B, and it also lists the sizes, or the measurements, I should say, and you can read the measurements below the pattern to figure out if you have the right measurements. So the square one can actually fit on these squares. As you can see, it's blue in the picture and it's blue in the pattern, so you know it'll fit. The purple one is measured 1 by 3¼ inches, which shows this measurement on pattern number 448. And I know this die can fit onto those purple shapes on that pattern. So really easy to figure out where decorative dies can go. And this pretty much applies to nearly all of our dies. They're all color coded, just like the pattern gallery photo or pattern gallery patterns. So really easy to figure out. Pretty much you look at the color on the package and you know, okay, I'm going to look for patterns with the same colors as the die image packaging. Today we're actually using a new die set D. We also have A, B, C like the other days, but we're also using die set D. This is the 1 and 4 3/8 size, and that measurement is, you can see that below your pattern. So be sure to print these patterns or look them up on your device if you want to see them closer up. I have lots of 4x6 photos today. As you can see on the right, I have lots of big sizes for my photos. These little squares are where my dies are going to be. And this side, we're going to fill in these squares, the smaller squares. So look for photos where, like this one, where the people are at a distance so we can all fit into that square shape. Well, if you're using the layering die, make sure it fits in the layering die shape, which I am going to be using today. And also, make sure to pick photos like this one. I'm comfortable with cropping it smaller. So on this one, this object, the statue is in the distance, and it'll fit into that square size very well. So make sure with these smaller square sizes to pick photos you are comfortable cropping down pretty small. So that is, again, page pattern number 448, and it's all squares. So make sure your photos can be cropped into squares today, except for a few of them. We are going to make, on the right, you can see there's some bigger spots. All right, and my colors today. So sometimes I actually base my colors on the pattern paper I find. This is a pattern paper from a Disney themed series, so I kind of base my colors off of these ones. So I have this grid paper that looks similar to that color. This grid paper is 12x12 Trappers. You can buy it on its own or in the Yukon Territory collection. Also, I looked at the colors on the pattern paper to choose my cardstock colors. So it's very Disney inspired page because this page is, the photos are of Disneyland. So it's another, and the photos are kind of random places around the park. So anyway, so whenever I use pattern paper, I actually base more of the colors on the pattern paper so it'll all match rather than basing it on the photos. So there's some more color inspiration for you. All right, so be sure to pause the video if you need to still gather your supplies, and let's get started with the class today. All right, before I start cutting, I'm going to give you a little design tip to keep in mind. So both layouts, obviously, you can see that they use the large square die from set A. And so they're going to be the same color along with that pink one I'm pointing to. And you can kind of see it, they make a triangular shape. If you pointed your finger at each one, you would see it makes that triangular shape. If you printed them out, you can kind of do that with your finger. So I'm cutting the square one with this red paper. So I'll also be cutting the other square shape and the pink rectangular shape with the red as well. And that'll draw your eye to all three reds. So I like to do that on a lot of my pages with the matte colors, as I like to have them not every single time, but I would do that. I do that a lot, where if you notice, if you took your finger on the designs of where the color mats are, it usually makes a triangle shape, which is a nice design tip from us. Just showing now I'm using magnetic plate, and then I have a plastic plate on top. My die goes next, and I have it facing up. All right, I'm just showing you that. And next, I place my cardstock or paper, whichever, and then I put another plate on top, which you can see it is very well used. I only cut on one plate. I like to keep one of them flat, because once you cut into them, you probably notice they start becoming warped. All right, now I'm going to cut my next square, and I'm just taking my time to use my scissors to cut around it. All right, I'm going to cut this here, and of course I always just store my extra cardstock away and use it for future projects. All right. I have the same sandwich as before, and I'm just slowly pulling it through the machine. And then again, I talked about this on the first day. I do have my dies in at an angle. And hopefully you can see the difference if you try it out. Putting it in at an angle or putting it straight through, that at an angle it does tend to cut better and more smoothly. All right, so next I'm going to use the pink set C. And I'm using the 5x4 square die. Square meaning if it's 5x4 squares on the grid, but if you look on your pattern, it does show the actual measurements on the bottom. So the measurements of this one are 5.5 by 4 3/8. I had to get another piece of cardstock because those square ones didn't give me enough room. Well, I should say the other paper I used the two squares, there wasn't enough room left on that paper. All right. I love the magnetic plate because I can just stick my die around right on top, and I don't have to worry about it slipping around too much. But if you do not have a magnetic plate, that's okay. You can use washi tape or another similar tape. All right, I got that one. So now I have my red pieces for the larger dies done. Actually, I think those are the only red pieces I'm using today. All right, I'm just gathering my patterns here. You can't see it on the camera, but I have a pile of stuff. Sometimes I have to fish things through. You know, when you're busy crafting, you kind of make a mess. Anyway, so I have my two patterns here. And let's see, I'm trying to hold them up here so you can see. On the right, I have these two squares and the big purple one, and they're going to all be the same color. And again, they are kind of making a triangle shape. The triangle's not quite as obvious as the other one, but it's sort of there. Basically, working in threes is another key, and working with a triangular design works very well. All right, so I'm grabbing the 6x4 die from set B. It is the biggest die in the set. It measures 6 5/8 by 4 3/8. All right, just take your time as you're cutting around it, although maybe by now you've really gotten the hang of it. And place it on my die machine carefully. And by the way, you can just put the die on first and then the paper on top if that's better for you. I kind of just did it both at the same time, but I've done this a lot more. All right, so I have this big piece done. It's the biggest block on the whole 2-page spread. All right, now I'm going to move on to the next cut. I still need to cut this die from set C again, but I'm going to be doing a different color than last time. I chose white. All right, so I'm just trying to collect my scissors here, and I'm going to carefully cut around the die. So just take your time. I know when you're new, you may have to go slower pace than I do. I'm just here as your guide. So please pause or rewind the video as much as you need to get your layout done. But hopefully over the next 7 days, you'll be more comfortable and get faster using this system. I think a lot of people say the first 2 pages are the most difficult, and then after that it becomes much easier. So hopefully it's becoming more easy for you. All right, now we can add our bigger spaces on our grid paper. So by looking at the pattern, I can see that this rectangle is going to go right on the edge of the right side of my grid paper. So I'll line it up along my lines here and just take your time. Put it right in the corner and make sure the top and left side lines are completely covered. And now this one goes right underneath the bigger rectangle. All right, just moving that out of the way so you can see the pattern better. All right, so I just put the glue on each corner and right in the center. That's all you need. And I know this one goes right below the bigger rectangle. And of course it goes right on the edge of the grid paper. So that's nice about the bigger design spots, just kind of can figure out where they go easier. So that's why I always start with the bigger ones and then fill in the rest of my page with the smaller elements. Of course, the square just goes right next to this rectangle. And then I know that the pink one goes right below, pretty much 2 spaces below the square. So there's a square and then there's that orange strip. So then you know that the shape represented with the pink goes on the very bottom here. All right, so I just carefully glue it on, and you can readjust as needed. That's why repositionable glue is important in case you need to readjust. Like here, I just realized I needed to add a little more glue. Sometimes with the dies, the sides kind of, I don't know how to describe it, they kind of poke up a little bit, so I wanted to add more glue to make sure this piece stays down on the grid much better. Alrighty, so now we have those down, and I'm going to put in the center square. Now, it may be tricky to figure out where the center is on the grid paper. So you can look at your pattern, and I know these 2 lines are 3 squares long, and this square is 3 by 3. So I count 3, that's where the square is, and I go to the 4th line where the strips are. And I kind of know at the intersection, right where my fingers are at, that's the edge of the square. And I know to count over 3 more. And that's where the square should go, is right in the center. It's kind of like yesterday, except we don't have the 1-inch squares today to count. So you kind of have to look at the measurements. And if you know, for example, the strips, if you look at the measurements, they're 3 1/4 long, so that means they're 3 squares long. So you know to count 3. All right, next we're going to be cutting out the mats for our smaller squares. All right, these squares measure 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. And so I'm going to grab that die from set A. I also mark it as the 3 by 3 square die, meaning 3 by 3 squares on the grid paper. And for this one, well, the squares are going to be multiple colors, so it's up to you what colors you make them. And earlier I talked about how 2 of them were going to be that same blue as my large rectangle, but at the moment I'm going to be cutting a couple of them with this fun pattern paper. I believe this is from Echo Park. If not, I'll have it I have it in the description below what brand this pattern paper is. I don't have any way to check it at the moment, but I believe it is Echo Park. Alrighty. Got that first one done. Okay, so I can reuse that washi tape, which is nice. I can't really do that on the photos because they just really stick to the photographs, but for paper, you can totally reuse the washi tape. All right. I actually kind of like lining up my grid paper and my die on that magnetic plate because it can kind of sit still while you're putting the tape on. I'm using washi tape on this pattern paper. I don't want to be crooked because I am using on some pattern papers. I don't worry about whether or not it's straight because it would look good either way. But these ones, I felt like even if the die was off slightly, the fireworks would have an angular look, and I didn't really want that. So definitely use washi tape if you have a pattern paper that you want to keep straight. Like the other day, I used a chevron pattern, and so I wanted that to be straight, obviously. I didn't want it to look sideways or... Anyway, sometimes I just don't want my paper to be crooked. All right, so now I'm using cardstock, which I'm not bothering to use washi tape this time because it doesn't really matter. And this is the same blue color I used to make my largest rectangular block before. All right, so I got the first one. Now I'm going to do my second one. All right, so I hope this is becoming easier and easier as you've been making your pages. You are hopefully faster at it than the last 2 days. All right, I put it through my machine. And let's see, it's cut. All right, I'm going to put that one to the side as well. Next, I'm going to use this die to cut some white paper, which you saw I used that earlier on one of my bigger dies. So again, take your time if you need to. And also, I know this video, it's only my voice. There's no music or anything, so feel free, to play some music. Sometimes it's nice to have a nice calming or nice upbeat music in the background. So feel free to turn some music on. And maybe even grab yourself a snack, if you need to. Keep yourself energized while you're working on your pages. Alrighty. Yeah, see, this time I put the die down and then I just kind of put the cardstock on top. Alright, I'm going to roll it through the machine, and maybe you are too. If not, please pause the video at any time. Alright, got that piece done. And I'm going to move this white cardstock out of the way so I decided to add more blue to my layout. I needed to make we need to make 2 more squares. I'm so used to doing these videos just for my own pages, but yes, you are doing it along with me. So we need to make 2 more squares, and I decided to add 2 blue ones. I didn't have any other colors, and another color might have made the page too busy, and I really like this blue. I think the white would have been too much. It's too much contrast. And the black fireworks paper, I didn't really have enough of that anyway. Had to grab another sheet of blue here. But the blue is just a nice color, and it's not too contrasting against the grid paper I'm using. Alright, so I'm going to put my die down and then put the paper on top as usual. So you guys probably have the hang of it at this point, right? But it's still nice to, I'm sure, to have some guidance on making these pages. Alright, got my 2 squares done, so we can add those to the grid paper soon. But first we are going to be using another die from set A. So I'm getting my pattern here. We need to cut these 3 squares. They measure 2 1/8 by 2 1/8 inches. It's one of the smaller dies in set A. And it's this one here. Alright, and I'm also going to be cutting with the pattern paper here, like I did before with the medium size squares. Alright, so I'm just taking my time. Again, this pattern paper, I don't want it to cut crooked because I want the fireworks to be straight. I'm going to use washi tape. If you have a pattern paper or cardstock that doesn't really need to be straight, or if you're not worried about it being crooked, you don't have to use washi tape necessarily. Alright, I got that first square done, so I need to do it 2 more times using the same paper again. This paper is actually from a 6x6 paper pack, which is really nice. I like that the pattern is really, it's because it's 6x6, the pattern is much smaller, and I think it fills in these smaller spaces much better than the original 12x12 paper, the pattern paper. I have the 12x12 pattern paper too, but sometimes it's nice to have the designs be smaller for the smaller spaces. Okay, we got our second square, and now we just need to cut it one more time. We can do it, guys. Just one more square. Although we still got more to cut after this, so. Alright, I'm just trying to get my paper here. And again, I'm going to grab my scissors, although I could put it in the machine. It's the paper's small enough it would cut through, but I'm still going to cut it anyway. Right, taking my time, putting the washi tape on. And as you can see, my die is put in at an angle because it makes the cuts easier. All right, we got our final square done. Yay! Okay, now we get to add these smaller squares to our grid paper. So I have the pattern here so you can see where I'm going to place each square. All right, first I'm just gonna place down the squares where I want them to go. So I'm putting these black ones on opposite ends. So I do that a lot with the colors on this kind of pattern, as I put the colors on opposite ends of each other. All right. Put the white one here, and I can see from the pattern it goes right into that corner. So that means I'm going to put the other, well, okay. Kind of deciding where I want it because I still have 2 other blue ones, so guess we'll see how it looks this way. No, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, so I'm going to put the white in the place I originally thought of. Alright, put that there. Blue in here. Yeah, I think I like that better actually. So take your time if you have multiple colors and decide where you like the placement. I kind of like how the blue squares kind of match with the, we don't have the purple strip elements on there yet. I mean, the strips won't be purple, but they're purple in the pattern, and they kind of mimic that in a way, just on the opposite diagonal of the layout. Okay, so I'm placing it down with my Re-positionable glue. Again, it's really easy. Pretty much all the elements, except for maybe the smaller pieces. I always put the glue in each corner in the center, so hopefully you're quicker about gluing these down. All right, putting them here. And as I'm doing this, you can kind of see, because I have these bigger squares up, it's easier to tell where those smaller 1x3 strips are going to go once they are cut in a little bit. All right, just take your time as you place these squares along the grid lines. There's no need to rush. You know, it's like they say, you can't rush art. So for good craft, take your time. So we'll get to those strips soon, but now I'm going to add these smaller squares, and it's pretty easy to tell that they just go right in that line. So you see I just place them there. And now I'm going to add glue on each of them. So on these smaller squares, if you could see, I'll show it right now. I put a diagonal line in the center that just goes across, and then 2 little spots on the other corners. It's small enough, you know, I don't feel a need to have a individual middle part or anything, but you can do that too if you really want to save on extra glue. All right, these are down, so we need to add our strips and our embellishments. So we are going to start doing that now. All right, I'm showing my pattern again, and this time we're going to need set D, which if you look at the measurements, this is 4 3/8 by 1 inch. So we're finally trying a new die set today. So sets D and E are pretty much your strip dies. All right, this is pattern paper from that same Disney set from before that I showed earlier. I'm just sometimes with these strip dies, especially for some reason, the magnet doesn't like them. That's what I find. The other ones, for some reason, they'll stick on the magnet well, but the strip dies, the magnet wants to shift them over. I don't know why. But again, I am using washi tape, so my pattern stays nice and straight once I am done with it. Well, yeah, it stays straight on the page and doesn't have a tilted look when I'm finished. All right, got the first strip cut. Alrighty, and now we get to use this a second time, and this will be the last time we'll be using this die specifically. This time the magnet seems to like it better. So I'm just trying to put it right on the corner of my pattern paper as much as possible. I'm going to add my washi tape and then, of course, cut around it with my scissors. Alrighty, I'm going to put that one, put the paper aside. So generally on a page, I like making all the strips the same color. Generally, not always, but generally, yes. So we got this one done. I'm going to put this one away. And next, we're going to be cutting these strips from set B. This is the smallest die in the entire set, so easy to find. It measures 3 1/4 by 1 inch. And this pattern paper, what's nice about it is it doesn't matter. It looks the same whether you have it vertical or horizontal. So I'm able to just cut my strips in the same direction on this paper. And it worked out perfectly that this one 6x6 sheet was enough to fill or to use up the 2 1x4 strips, and now I can use that same sheet for the 1x3 strips. Again, like I said, usually if I have strip elements on a page, well, even if they're different sizes, I generally like to make them all the same color. Or photograph. Sometimes I use a photograph. There's some exceptions out there, but I like them all to look the same personally. So that's why I'm using this yellow paper again for these sizes. Again, just take your time. Of course, you may be using a totally different paper than I do, so you do not have to cut your die the same exact direction. You cut it the direction you need. Just keep in mind that there are 2 vertical strips and 2 horizontal strips. So if you have a pattern paper where you need to pay attention to what direction it's cut, make sure 2 of them are vertical and 2 of them are horizontal. I just happen to like this particular design. But like I said, you could be using, plain cardstock, even if you wanted to, which for today, since you're a beginner, I would recommend, maybe I should have said this earlier, but I think it's fun to use pattern paper or cardstock on your page. But if you wanted to, you could also replace it with photos. I don't do that as often, but occasionally I will cut my strips with photos if it works out that way. Okay. All right, just one more cut, guys. We can do it. I know it's a lot of work to crank them all in the machine, especially since you got to do it one at a time. So we actually, if you are a beginner and you want it to expand your die collection, there is the 1x3 strip die on snapandcrop.com, and you can actually cut 6 of these strips at the same time. So anyway, we got this one cut, and now we're ready to place them on our layouts. All right, I put my pattern here, but it probably is pretty clear where they should go. It's pretty much you're filling up the rest of the grid paper with these strips. And yeah, with the strips, I usually just swipe one line of glue. Although these ones are a bit long, so I kind of I hope this makes sense, I kind of make a diagonal line, so it goes from the top left corner to the bottom right corner of the strip. Just a little slight diagonal. So that was quick and easy, and that side is finished other than the photos and the decorative dies. And of course this side is going to be pretty quick. Again, if you have pattern paper where it matters which direction they go, make sure you place them on the paper the way you would like. My pattern paper didn't really matter, so again, I'm just gluing it down diagonally, and if you feel like you need to put in extra glue on your strip, that's fine. I just did that. I had a little more glue in one of the corners. Alrighty, and just take your time as you place it on the grid. We got those 2 done, and now we have 2 more. Alright, I'm going to put this one down. So after I glue on the last one in a moment, we are going to be using decorative dies. If you don't have any decorative dies today, you are welcome to skip those steps, and your page will look great even when it's just pattern paper. But hopefully, if you don't have them, you can come back to review this class again. But if you do have those dies, let's get started. Alright, I'm using the quatrefoil die set to decorate my page, and it's a pretty versatile die, and it's very pretty. I thought it went with my Disney page because Disney has all these wonderful details in their park, and it's very pretty there as well. So I decided to use it for my layout today. Anyway, so you put it through the machine just like the other dies. Now, a lot of times with the more intricate dies, you will need something sharp, like a pair of craft tweezers. So I use it to poke all these extra parts out. And then there is a hole in the corner. Well, there's always one hole. Sometimes there's one on the side, but on most dies I find that it's a hole that's right in the corner, and you poke the tweezers through, and then you can pull out your die. So if it gets sharp, or if your paper gets stuck, grab something sharp like a pair of craft tweezers. If you don't have the tweezers, you can also use a paper clip. You can unfold it and use the sharp end to poke it through. You can use a thumbtack. The thumbtack might be a little thick, but it sometimes works. So anything sharp that can fit through the hole will work. But the craft tweezers are nice, and you can use the tweezers for other projects. All right, got the second one done. So it is pretty quick. I'm actually getting these done pretty quick. The quatrefoil die doesn't have too many tiny details, so some of you, depending on your die, you may need to take more time to, get rid of all the extra pieces. And yes, please check to make sure all the pieces are gone, because sometimes I have gotten the paper stuck in the die and then I go to use it without checking first, and then I make another cut and I'm like, why didn't it cut all the way? And it's because I had paper stuck in it from a different time. All right, so I got my third one done. If you're still trying to get yours done, please pause the video if you need to. Alrighty, so I got 3 done, and maybe you don't need 3 done. Like I said, you may only need 1 for your page, so maybe you got done before I did. All right, next I'm using a 1x3 die. This is also from the quatrefoil set for today. If you don't have this size die, that's okay. If you had a 2x2 or you have one of these, I just want you to try out at least one of the sizes and help you understand how to incorporate them in the pattern or on your scrapbook layouts. All right, so I got this one, and I'm going to use my tweezers to clean it out. Now this die, and you may also have one that's similar or even the same exact die I'm using. Some of the dies are very thin. I'm going to clean that plate off real quick. So this quatrefoil die, it is it's very thin, and it can bend very easily. So when you use it, when you're cutting it, it's easy to cut, but when you're poking the tweezers through, be careful when you're pulling it out. Right, using the other side of my paper to crank it through. So these will be going on the strips on the left side of my layout, so I'm going to be cutting this die 2 more times after this one. There we go, second one. Now I have to poke these out every time. There's other die tools out there too that Spellbinders has a tool where it's multiple tools in one kind of thing. I find sometimes that tool works, but sometimes it doesn't. So there's other tools out there you can use besides craft tweezers. All right, I'm just grabbing some more paper. Right, cutting it through again. Of course, if you have, I have a ton of white cardstock, so, these small dies, they're a good way to get rid of all that extra cardstock you may have used on bigger mats or other projects. All right, rolled that one pretty quick. It's pretty quick to use in die machine. The longest part really is getting all these little pieces out, and like I said, some dies are less intricate, so you may not have to worry about this as much, but mine's a pretty intricate die, so it takes a little more time for me to clean it out. All right, this is my last cut. We can do it, guys. Hopefully you're on your last cut and you're like, when is this going to end? It's like, it's almost done. All right, I'm going to poke my tweezer through this hole again for the last time. All right, now we can put it on our page. I'm just going to clean this off real quick. Even though I won't be using it again, I don't want to be surprised the next time I do a project. So that's what I recommend, because then if you do it for another project, you just have to do it then. So, or you might forget like I do sometimes, and you cut it anyway and you wonder what's wrong with it. Okay, I have all my quatrefoil dies cut, and it's pretty clear where they need to go. These are the only 3 squares on my whole page. So I'm going to put them here. And again, maybe you didn't cut 3 of these dies because your page might have looked too busy for your page, or you were just happy with 1 cut of these. I'm also going to I have some cardstock out because these dies are thinner and you could get glue on the rest of your page, and that can be very annoying, especially when you start putting your photos on. You don't want the glue stuck on the front of the photo. So I'm using my Hermodal dispenser, and I'm rolling it on there pretty carefully, and you will get the dots outside of the lines, and I just take my finger and just rub it along the lines and kind of push them to the back of the die. So pretty easy. A lot of people ask about that. A lot of people, when using these dies, they wonder how to glue it, and you may have your own preference on how to glue these more intricate shapes. There certainly are other different glue brands out there, or there's plenty of glue with finer tips to get around those edges easier, but this is what's available to me, and I don't find it to be too difficult to put the dots on and then just rub them to the side. Usually the glue that has a fine tip is also a liquid glue, and I find the liquid glue to just be messier anyway. So anyway, like I said, just have a extra piece of cardstock so you don't get glue on your table or on your project, or glue you don't want anyway. All right. I have to put the die at different spots because there's glue on other parts of the cardstock, and I don't want it to get on the front. So, and then you have to keep picking it up because it gets sticky. All right, I'm just adjusting the sticky dots around my die. Getting close here. All right, now I get to glue it on top of my square, and it's really easy because the square is already covering the grid, so I know to just put it on top of there, and it's done. Yay, we got that part done. It looks really good, and it really stands out on that fireworks paper, doesn't it? And because the fireworks are small, I feel like you can see that pattern better than if I had used like a 12 by 12 size sheet of that same paper. Just getting the excess glue off this cardstock so I can possibly use it for some more dies later. So for these strips, you can do the same thing I did before, but I also want to show you another glue option today. These dies actually can fit in the Xyron Create a Sticker machine, which I really love this machine. It is wonderful for this shape of die. It's also great for those 1-inch decorative dies. And basically you put it through the machine and then you rub the die cut. And you see there's this plastic covering. So after you're done rubbing it, you take the plastic part off, and now your die cut is a sticker, so it's sticky on the back side. And then you can place it just right on top of your paper. It's great. I feel like it takes up less time than if I use the other glue. It does have excess glue, so I always just take my finger and rub it off. It's pretty easy. It is very sticky. This is also Re-positionable Glue, by the way. So the Xyron Create a Sticker does have both permanent and the repositionable type of glue. All right, and you can put more than one in at the same time, which I'm doing here. All right, now I just have to rub all 3 of them. Try to take my time and do it very well. Make sure it's all covered. And then you take the plastic part off. And yeah, sometimes the die cuts do stick to the plastic part, so be careful. They're still usable. Anyway, I'm just throwing that part into the trash, and now I can peel these up. And again, they're just like stickers. And it's so cool. And it's really nice. Then I'm just gonna take the glue off. This Xyron glue is very sticky and it really sticks it down really well. And I really like it for these more intricate dies because, as I said earlier, this particular die, not all the strip dies are like this. Some of them are very thick, but this one has such intricate details and actually it's very thin. But what I like about this glue is that it helps it stay on the grid paper really well. I'm not worried about it after it's glued down. I'm not worried about it ripping all that much. I mean, I'm able to take the excess glue off easily, and so that's why I like it, because it really gets it stuck on your page. Which some dies you don't need it for, but for dies like this one, I highly recommend getting that glue dispenser. Alrighty, I'm scrubbing this one off, and we are done with our decorative dies pretty much, guys. So if this is your first time using the decorative dies, I hope you enjoyed it. It's just a nice little way to add on to your basic pages. You know, the basic look kind of can get boring after a while, so adding these dies gives it a little more spark and pop. So I really like it and I enjoy using them when I can. Okay, yeah, it is very sticky and there is a lot of glue to get off. So anyway, that's done, and now we just need to add our photographs. So let's get started. I just placed my 4x6 photo here. There's one spot this time to fit this size photograph, so I suggest using a horizontal photograph that you really like. This one is a very nice photo of the Walt and Mickey statues. So just, yeah, I like using, for those spots, using one that I particularly like or is a particularly good photograph. All right, so let's trim down the rest of our photos. Okay, I'm bringing out my pattern again, and we're going to be using the layering dies for the 5x4 size. So you can see it's slightly smaller than the die we used to create our cardstock mats earlier. Okay, I'm just grabbing my photos here. So if I happen to get ahead of you, remember you can always pause the video to catch up. So I have this photo here and I'm just taking my time on where to crop it. I'm trying to get as much of that sign as I can. It's a great little sign down on Main Street. I don't know if it's probably not there anymore, but that's why we save our memories, because things like the Disney parks constantly change, right? All right, so we got our first photo cut. I'm just going to get rid of these extra pieces. Now we're going to move on to the next photo, and take your time. And if you're trying to do photographs that just don't work, save them for another project. That's what I do anyway, because there are times when I really want to use a certain photograph and it just doesn't work, or maybe you just have that one photograph that just does not go with your pattern or whatever, but there's always other projects you can use it for. All right, again, I'm just using washi tape and checking the back to make sure my photo covers the entire die, or else I might get a crooked cut and I don't really want that. So that's why you need to take your time on these photographs, because nobody wants to go back and reprint them, right? All right, we got the two with the set C dies, we actually just use one die. We use the layering die. All right, I'm trying to get myself set up here for the next cuts. This time we're going to do the two squares. So you will find that layering die from set A. So I'm trying to get that pulled out. All right, so Here we use the layering die. It's pretty much the second die in the layering die part if you're keeping them separated for storage. Alright, so I'm just putting it, taking my time, making sure I'm cropping the part I would like. Flipping it over. And again, if you didn't notice, I am using my crease pads so I don't get those. Sorry. There's a lot of words in this video and I forget. Anyway, pretty much you don't want the creases in the photos. Those little embossed edges. So the crease pad helps you not get those embossed edges. Alright, so this photo is actually going to be the focal point of my mostly square layout, and I really like the sign. Really represents what Disneyland is. Okay, so just take your time, like I said, make sure the photograph covers all of the die so you know you're not going to get a crooked edge or something. Okay, we got this square photo. I'm just taking off those excess pieces and that's done. So, all right, I'm just gonna throw these parts away. I'm getting ready for the next cuts in a moment. All right, this time we're going to cut all these squares. So I'm gonna pull out the layering die that fits with the 3x3 grid size die. Just so you know, it does crop pretty small. Of course, we kind of used it yesterday, so you probably already know. So for instance here, the people in the photograph fit that space really well, so that's why I used it. Alright, so I got the first part, or first photo cut. Okay, now I'm just deciding where to put it on this one. Alright, I think this part's good. Alright, I'll stick with this. So that's what's, just take your time when you're figuring out where to crop your photographs and feel good about the spot you choose before cutting it. Once you cut it, you have to reprint, which isn't the end of the world, but I try to avoid that personally. Anyways, so gonna cut through the next one. And this one was pretty easy because that statue was really small in the distance, so it's pretty easy to crop that one. This one, I'm taking my time because the subject is a little bit tight within that space. So if that's the case with you, you may want to use washi tape. See, I didn't trust it well enough, so I'm trying to grab my washi tape here. Yep, so yeah, when in doubt, use tape. So I'm just taking my time, using tape this time because it would have bugged me if it cropped in the wrong spot because it shifted in the machine or something. Maybe some of you are the same way. Alright, I got that one done. It looks good. I'm gonna keep going. There's a few photos left. This one's challenging because I'm like, oh, what do I want? And there's so much going on. It's also cool. But I'm just going to take the centerpiece, getting a bit of each thing in there. There we go. Now I'm going to put it through my machine. By the way, I never mentioned this before, but when you are using the crease pad, do not cut into it. A lot of people ask where to place it with your die. Always have the die, the flat part of the die on it. Do not cut into the crease pad. It won't work out as well. And I don't really think it's meant to cut into either. So we don't want you to damage, plates like that. Or the pads. So just remember to make sure the die is going the opposite direction from the crease pad and it's cutting into a plastic plate. Yeah, this photo I just chose it shows all of Space Mountain, but I just wanted the little sign, so it worked out for me to crop it this small. Yep, see? Sign of an old ride. I don't think it's there anymore. Right, I have these masks, and again, it's kind of, I get to kind of decide where do I want to crop this photo, and I picked the right spot. So yeah, kind of use your gut, or sometimes in a photo it's really obvious what part you want to crop, but sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know, there's a lot of good things. All right, I got this one, and all the squares are cut, so we can finally add them to our page. All right, so adding the photos is actually the easiest and probably the most satisfying part of making a layout, because it means you're almost done and you finally get to add your photos, which on Mosaic Moments pages, that is what stands out, is the photographs and the memories, right? I accidentally put that one down. All right, again, just like yesterday, I place the photos down depending on which way the subject is facing. So on the bottom left, I put that picture there because the two subjects, the person and the wooden statue thing, I don't know what that is, are kind of facing towards the right, towards the rest of the layout, and Walt and Mickey are facing towards the left. So I thought it would be a great spot to put that picture because they happen to be facing the rest of the layout, which is totally appropriate, right? For they're seeing the rest of the park, so it kind of goes with the story of my layout. And of course, there's photos like this one that I just placed where it kind of doesn't matter where you put it because it's in the center, right? All right, next I'm going to place these smaller squares, and I am paying attention to which way the subjects are facing. So the two I just put down, both subjects are kind of facing towards the right, towards the rest of the layout. If it was on the other side, it would be facing away from the layout, and we don't want our eye to draw away from it, right? All right, now I'm just gonna see where if I like the placement or not. I kind of felt like the one photo looked too dark for that black background. So yeah, I think it looks good on the white. All right, there we go. I like the placement now, because now that bottom right corner photo really stands out on that background. All right, I think I like the placement. So yeah, keep that in mind as well with your photo placement. Does the photo stand out on your paper mat that you chose? And maybe sometimes you don't want it to stand out because maybe it's a secondary photo anyway, but for me, I like it. I want the mat to help make the photo pop. And I do like using color mats. Sometimes, as I've shown the last couple days, I have photos directly on the grid paper, but for some reason, the mat in the background really helps the photos pop even more. But that's just my opinion. That's what I noticed. So today, as you can see, all my photos are matted. And for these smaller squares, if your photos were a little bit too big or too tight for a future project, you can always skip cutting the paper mats and just cut your photos to the grid size, which we have done, well, I have anyway, last couple of days. So it's perfectly fine if you skip the mats today and just, again, made the photos the grid size. All right, I'm almost done here. See, got that one down, and I got this last photograph. Pretty sure it's the last one, right? All right, just eyeball and take your time as you place it down and make sure all the margins around all your photographs are equal. And we're done! Yay! Again, if you've fallen behind and, you're trying to catch up, that's fine. Please pause the video if you need to and rewind any parts that you need to rewatch. Just want you to take your time. I'm just your guide to help you know what to do, basically, so and where to place everything. But anyway, I'm assuming now that you are done, and oh gosh, you got a third page down, and it was really exciting to add these decorative dies today. They really help the page to pop more, right? So I hope you use more of these. They're wonderful. and I hope it was pretty easy to understand how to incorporate it with your page patterns. Alright, so that is the end of day 3. Tomorrow I'm going to show you how to create multiple mats on your layout. So get ready to use a lot of paper tomorrow, guys. Alright, we'll see you tomorrow.